So today, being that it is the feast of the Dormition of Our Lady Theotokos, or otherwise known in the West as the Assumption of Our Lady, I wanted to talk about this feast day, what it means, and even connect to us being able to participate within the microcosm of the meaning of the Dormition through St. Maximilian Kolbe and how that played out in his own life. Now, in order to understand the Dormition, one concept that's important to understand is the feminine and death are closely linked to each other. And in one way or another, the feminine always points the man or the masculine to death. Now, you might think, what do I mean by that? Now, if you look at the very early beginning of the story of Genesis of Adam and Eve, she partakes of the fruit and points Adam to the taking of that fruit as well. Now, theologically speaking, within the story, it's not viewed as a fault that you are to complete all blame to Eve for that doing, because Adam did not protect her and failed in his mission as well, where it is his duty and it's mostly his fault that humanity has fallen. But there's still an aspect of it where the feminine has pointed him to death. Now, the thing is that this pattern isn't always laid out as a bad or an evil thing. And as we all know, there's more nuances to understand of different patterns than just a simple one-to-one correlation with symbolism. Now, if you fast forward to the New Testament and we look at the relationship of Christ, the new Adam, and Our Lady, the new Eve, at the wedding of Cana, we know that she also points Christ to his death. We have people reaching out to him to be able to change the water into wine. And to some extent, he refuses, where she points him and reminds him to start his ministry. There's different ways that are put early, a reminder to start his ministry at that moment or whatever it may be, but she points him to the cross. Because as soon as he performed his first miracle, that would be his first step to going to his crucifixion, to his death. And so in some aspect, Our Lady also points him to death. Now, the mysterious thing is that it doesn't end at death, and there's a prospect of being born anew. You can also see this with baptism, where usually water and cycle is usually also associated with the feminine, where it washes away or brings to death our old selves and brings about a new rebirth into the Christian life. It is further emphasized in the Eastern Church, where if you're baptized at an older age, where you pick a new name, where there's this prospect where the old you dies and you are born anew, and so you carry a new name that's linked to the church. Usually you pick a saint's name to be referred to when you receive the sacraments within the church. So as you can see, it's not always bad. But even if we think about this pattern in relationship to maybe we may have with women, particularly masculine to feminine, it can also play out as a bad thing. If we think about the archetype or the role of something like a siren or the mermaid, the mythos and telos behind that, where I previous video connected them to something like, these online OnlyFans girls or these provocative women that sell sex to men, the pattern still plays out in the same way, except in that case, there's no resurrection and she just leads you to her death. A mermaid grabs the sailor's attention where he falls off his ship and he's dragged to the bottom of the sea. In previous videos, I've talked about how the way it connects to an OnlyFans girl is that there's a want of the masculine to develop a relationship with the woman, and she in turn drags him down into a pit of meaninglessness because you're giving all your attention and finances and money and seed to this woman, and you get nothing in return. And so you find yourself at the bottom of the sea, floating with no meaning or purpose, no air to continue onward with the relationship. So in some way, there is a connection with the feminine and death, and they also carry it within their cycle of menstruation. Now, going back to Our Lady the Theotokos and her pointing to Christ on the cross, in the icon of the Dormition, of the Feast of the Dormition, we see that her body lays in the center image with the apostles around her sleeping body, and Christ usually stands at the center, holding her as a baby, being that her soul is young and born anew. And so in a way, the Theotokos further exemplifies of how resurrection looks through us, of the experiencing of death, but not being permanently stuck in death and resurrecting into our Lord's kingdom. In the same way with marriage, a man may die in terms of his wants and desires and his selfish pursuit for power. And in marriage, the wife directs him in order to be able to die to himself and serve for his family in order to have a thriving kingdom of that resurrection of his marriage. Now, what does this have to do with Maximilian Kolbe? Now, Maximilian Kolbe serves as a perfect microcosm of this pattern. So for those of you who do not know, Maximilian Kolbe is a Polish Franciscan priest, where he had a ministry called the Knights of the Immaculata, and later got put into Auschwitz I, where he volunteered himself to be put into a starvation bunker in place of another man, and ended up being killed in the starvation bunker with 9 other men. Now, this story might seem completely disconnected and completely arbitrary to what I just talked about before, but Saint Maximilian Kolbe also had a very profound dedication to Our Lady. And in the same way that he gave his life up for her, she also, similar to Christ, pointed him to his cross. And so Auschwitz, in the starvation bunker, you can say he descended into death, where he was resurrected as a martyr through his death for the love of her. Now there's a deeper meaning behind that, because there were 9 other men with him in the cell, which it said that there was singing coming from his cell when he was down there with him. There was prayer heard, and through these songs and these prayers, a sense of hope that lingered in the air of this death camp. And so hopefully you can make that connection and see that in some sense he also descended into death and was crucified by her pointing him in that direction. So in conclusion, I hope this gives you a bit more fruitful knowledge of what the Dormition actually celebrates. And it's pretty beautiful to know that in the East there's a tradition where it's also known as the New Pascha, because it's another image of the resurrection, where what God promised is being fulfilled and shown to us through his own mother. So hopefully all this makes sense. If you enjoyed what I talked about, if you learned something new, please like and subscribe to my channel. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. And once again, have a blessed feast day of the Dormition or the Assumption, whatever tradition you hold to. And I hope to see you in the next video.